Hi, Dave Youngquist, Michigan Toy Soldier. No, it's been a little while, but we're back. And today what I'd like to cover is a fairly advanced painting technique called Pointillism, actually developed by George Seurat in the 1880s. And I've been working for the past couple months on exploring this technique in figure painting. I'm going to be using the Andrea black paint set, all 6 colors, Camel Black Brown by Vallejo, and my favorite color, Burnt Umber by Vallejo. Now this effect is very cool because what it allows you to do, and instead of putting highlights and shadow colors in smooth lines, what we do is paint with hundreds and hundreds of little tiny dots of color to create the shadows and the highlights, and by doing so achieving a really great weathered, beaten up effect. The techniques that we're going to be using require some just really basic tools. I recommend using good quality brushes, but ones that have probably passed their prime, so they could be a little beaten up, because this technique is going to be a little bit rough on the point of a brush. And we're also going to be using some sponges, or small, pieces of foam. Let's get started. Okay, our first step in replicating a beat up wool hat is that I'm going to take a little piece of sponge, just tore it off, out of some packing material, and dip it in the Camel Black Brown, and I'm going to remove a bit of the paint. And then what we do is randomly just start hitting the edges, and you can see it's pretty loose, and that's what's cool about this effect. And especially, if you have trouble with blending acrylics, this is another way to create your shadows and highlights, and you might find it's a lot of fun. So we got a little bit of burnt umber in there, and we're just applying these dots randomly, but do notice that I'm not applying the dots around the inner portion of the cap where it would not receive the same amount of wear. Okay, so we've got a bit of the black brown. Now I'm going to take a bit of the burnt umber. Same thing, same sponge. And we add this little bit lighter color, but burnt umber is such a great color because it is still a very grayish brown. Okay, to start with, I'm going to take color number 6 in the Andrea black paint set, which is just really a very nice matte black, and paint a shadow line around the brim of the cap. If you have an ink set, inks will do very well for this step also. And you don't have to be too precise because, again, we're going to be going over this with lots of little dots of paint. Now I'm going to move to my next color, which is color number 5, which is a very, very dark brown. I should mention that I base coated this in a kind of a medium black, and I'm just going to go in and starting with the edges, if you could see, and the paint again very thin, and just randomly applying dots around the brim. And I will continue to do that with this color as we progress. And so you don't have to watch all of this. I will keep switching colors and you'll see what's happening. Okay, so we've got that color finished. We're going to go to the next color, which is number 5, which is one of their shadow colors. And literally we just go through and do the exact same thing. Little dots of color all the way through. Remembering where your light source is coming from. And I really enjoy painting this way. I know it seems really random, but the effect really amazingly looks very much like cloth. So I will apply this color in the exact same pattern. Okay, again using the same technique, and again it's very subtle right now, but that's why we keep layering in different colors. I'm going to jump to color number 1, which is the base color in the Andrea set, and I'm going to now start concentrating the color farther out to the edges of the hat, because of course it would get a little bit more worn out there. A little bit more on the top. Again, random patterns. Now I'm painting an extremely awkward angle so you can see what I'm doing. Typically I'd have this much closer and I wouldn't be leaning over so much. But again, following the same pattern and keeping these dots a little bit smaller, and again towards the outside of the brim and towards the top of the hat. Now going to color number 2, which is the first in the highlight color, we're just going to dot just the edge of the brim. And we apply that again in a very random pattern. What we're trying to avoid here is drawing a straight line, which I would have normally done in the past along the brim. And what this really achieves with this technique is just a very nice random wear pattern. And you can see it's starting to really pop out now. And I would also apply this to the very top of the hat band. Okay, I'll finish this up. We'll put a couple more dots here, and then we'll go to our final color, and we'll be completed. Okay, so we're using our final highlight color, and again we're going to keep this color to the outside edge of the brim, the very top portions of this beat up old dusty wool hat. Now typically I would go back and using the other colors, including the browns and everything else, and lay in more dots. So you just keep working it until you get something that you like. Just keep looking at your work and assessing it. But I think you'll find this technique a real valuable one, and I'd like to show you some pieces that I've just completed using this method. Here's a couple examples of pointillism applied to figures. On this Peely 120mm pirate kit, after the base coats were laid down, which was very, very dark blue for the jacket, almost black, and extremely dark red for the pantaloons, I went in with lighter tones of the blue and started dotting all the edges. And at that time, I also began adding different shades of gray, browns, and mixtures of the two, so gray browns. They were applied in a very random manner, but always trying to remember where my light source is coming from, and in this case 12 o'clock. So as you can see, there's hundreds of little dots of color that create the highlights in the shadows. This technique was then also applied to the tricorn cap and all of the leather on this. Again, it gives a really neat beat up appearance to his sword belt. Next, I'd like to talk about the Young Miniatures bust that I've just finished. On this particular one, we really pushed the envelope a little bit. First, the uniform was painted in a very light field gray, and then all the shadows were applied using this method, little dark spots of varying colors, using darker field grays, a little bit of browns mixed in there. Then the highlights were applied on the uniform using the same method. This gives a very realistic appearance of wool and beaten up wool. The helmet itself, what we did here was we applied a base coat of a real dark field gray using a different tone of it just so it contrasts with the uniform itself, and then used the sponge technique to create worn metal on the top of the helmet and on the edges. Then we went in with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little dots of paint, lots of different colors, always skewing towards the browns and the greens, and then applied a wash, a burnt umber, very thin wash over that, went back with the hundreds of colors, and Once that had all dried and I got the look that I liked, I took a number 2 pencil and ran it around the brim to give the appearance of freshly worn shiny metal. And finally, on this figure, I'd like to point out some of the techniques we've used in an earlier video. I used the Humbrol metal coat on the metal parts, buffed them, and then applied some highlights with some silver paint. And on the weapon itself, I painted it a very light Iraqi sand and then repeated coats of Vallejo smoke. Gives it a very realistic wood finish. I'm glad you stopped by today. This has been Dave Youngquist, Michigan Toy Soldier on YouTube. I hope to see you again soon.